All right, let's start by thanking Rabbi Braun for cleaning up the shul and for preparing for this beautiful class, as he does every week, but we don't thank him nearly enough.
Thank you, Rabbi Braun. You're welcome.
Okay, I wanted to just talk a little bit about Sukkos. Some of my friends. But it's actually, Sukkos is very relevant to what we're learning now. The Sefer that we're talking about now, Daas Tevunos, is all about how the forces of evil will eventually be destroyed and Hashem will reveal himself when Mashiach comes. And on Sukkos, that's actually one of the ideas of Sukkos. The first day of Sukkos we bring 13 cows, and then we bring 12, 11, 10, 9, until we get to 70. And these 70 cows represent, the reason we start at 13 and go down is because we're showing these Shivim Umos represent the Kochos of Ra, the forces of evil. And when we bring the 70 cows, starting with 13 and going to 12, 11, 10, we're showing the reduction, the defeat of evil in the world. And at the end, we have Shmini Atzeres, where we bring one cow for the Jewish people, that's just Hashem and the Jewish people. And that represents the total destruction of evil, which happens when Mashiach comes. So Sukkos is very relevant to this revelation of Hashem being one, and the destruction of evil, which is what we're learning about here in Daas Tevunos. And if you look at the Haftorah, right, on the first day of Sukkos, it's about the end of days, the war of Gog and Magog, all those types of things. And so Sukkos is really very relevant to what we're learning now in all of human history. Because all of human history, as we learned from Daas Tevunos, the Ramchal told us, is the destruction of evil and the revelation of Hashem's oneness, which we see as Sukkos by the decreasing number of Parim. Okay, so that's that. And we'll talk more about Sukkos on Thursday, God willing, about how it's the continuation of Yom Kippur and things like that. And the Sukkot is a very special holiday where we can reach very high levels. We have a special closeness with Hashem on Sukkot that we don't have other times during the year. Okay, so we're on page 88 of we'll be a few minutes if you want to stay to the end. Okay, page 88 in the bilingual edition, and we're in the middle of Siman Mem Daled. Okay, so Amar HaSeichel, says the intellect, V'nachnu adata dibarnu b'chlal, u'miyat tzarech level of pratim. So he says, until now we've talked about these concepts in general, and now we're going to talk about the details. What concepts? We talked about Hashem revealing himself, and we said that now, the world that we're in, Hashem has not yet revealed himself. We're in what we call the time of Hester, where Hashem is hiding himself. And we said there are two ways where Hashem will reveal himself. Either human beings will decide on their own to follow the forces of good and not the forces of evil, or Hashem will force us to get to that point. So there's these two time periods in general. We'll say there's the time where Hashem is hiding himself, which we're in now, and then there's a time where we have Hashem's revelation, where he reveals his oneness. And so the Ramchal is saying, we've talked about these concepts in general, now we're going to learn about the details. Well, this is the Seichel, because remember, this book is a conversation between the Seichel, the intellect, and the Neshama, and the soul. Kihine, Samnu Yisod Echad. We had one foundational principle, that the rules of creation and all of the laws are dependent on Hashem's revelation of his oneness. And we found that there are two times, the time where Hashem hides himself, and it will be revealed. The second time, after Hashem reveals himself. And these two times are the times where a person has his service of Hashem, the avoda that he does, and receiving the rewards. So the time that we're in now is where we serve Hashem, we do the avoda, what we're supposed to do, and later when Hashem reveals his oneness, that's when we get our reward. Right? People think, right, person does his avoda in this world and he dies and he goes right to heaven, and that's where the ultimate reward is, but that's not true. That's not how the Ramchal learns, and that's not how the Kabbalists learn. There is something called heaven, which is called Olam HaNeshamos, but that's not what the main place of getting our reward is. The main place to get the reward is that after Mashiach comes and after there's a resurrection of the dead, the world that we're in now will be transformed into a more spiritual world, and that's where we're going to get our reward. So the Ramchal is now talking about the differences between the world we find ourselves now and the world after Mashiach comes and after the resurrection of the dead, where we're going to get our ultimate reward. So he says that in each of these time periods we have to understand the different rules and the different details that apply to each time period, because the world is going to be different in each one. We have to understand the details of how Hashem made the world in the where we find ourselves now, the Helem of Yichud, where Hashem hides himself, and we have to understand that the world's going to be different when he reveals himself. We also have to understand, how are we going to transfer from this world to the next world, right? Is it just going to be like overnight, where it's going to turn into a spiritual world, or is there a whole process? So the Ramchal says we have to understand, one, is the details of this world and the next world, and two, how the process of transformation between this world and the next world. Because there has to be a place where they're connected, and to go, there has to be like some sort of bridge to connect one world to the next. Okay, let's begin in order. This comes out first. We should understand the details of the world we find ourselves now. Hashem is hiding himself, right? The whole world does not recognize that Hashem is one, even though we were davening for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur very much, that Hashem should reveal himself. Right? That was the whole idea. We're davening that Hashem should reveal himself, and we'll get to Olam Haba, and there will be no evil left in the world, because when Hashem reveals himself and everyone understands that God is one, and the only salvation really comes from God, and that everything that people put their faith into, whether it's certain movements that people believe in, or even people, they believe in their own strength and their own abilities, their own intelligence, they can be successful. When people recognize that the only success is putting one's faith in Hashem, then that's when evil will be destroyed. When humanity does that as a whole, and that's what we're davening for on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. But first, we're going to understand the world that we're in now, where this is hiddenness. Hashem hides himself, because we see there's evil in the world. Right? We can look around. We don't have to look too far, and we see there's evil. And Hashem hiding himself. That's the first time. We'll explain all of the service that we do and all the details. We're going to explain all of the aspects necessary to understand this thing. Okay, let's go a little further. And he's going to talk about this next part is a little complicated, but not so much. We'll see. It's actually very important. Amar HaSeichel, says the intellect, Hakdama achas gedoyla v'ikaris ma'od tzarech ani lahodielach kodem shenikanes lifnim be'inyan derachav ela yizbarach mishpatav. He says, however, before we go into a conversation of explaining the details of this world, there's something very, very important and very fundamental that I need to explain to you. That we're going to deal with. Amar Neshama, says the soul, Umahi, what is this? What is this idea which is so fundamental that he's got to explain this before we even get to a general explanation of everything? Amar HaSeichel, says the intellect, Hine, Anachnu roim chukim u'mishpatim asher hu yizbarach shmo misnaig ba'mimanu. We see that Hashem, he deals with us in a certain way, and he has certain rules that he deals with humanity. Anachnu nivrav, we are his creations. Midus u'drachim tzadikim, and his ways are just. His midos are just. Kasher gazer oimek hachachmaso, like he decreed. Achibavor hamidos ha'ele yichasnu lo ta'arim ravim b'chol divrei hanaviyim aleim shalom. And the way Hashem deals with us, we give many terms. We apply in the books of the prophets many terms to the way that God deals with us. And we call him Rachum, Hashem is merciful, Chanan, he shows us grace, Gibor, he's mighty, V'chol shar kinuim harav masher nisyachzu, and all these other names that we call God, right? We have in Shemon Esrei, right? Gibor, Agadol, Gibor Benara, and then all these other terms, we say Hashem does chesed, we say he's mighty, he's all these things. But there's something that's very important to understand when we give names to describe Hashem. We have to believe this with total clarity. He says like this. that when we say that Hashem is merciful or Hashem is kind, we are not describing Hashem's essence. We never talk about the essence of God because we have no understanding about the essence of God. When we say that Hashem is merciful, all we're saying is that He deals with us, He relates to us in a merciful way. But we're not describing the essence of God. When you say that a person is kind, you're saying that, well, his actions of acting kind reflect his inner essence of being kind. But when we talk about God, God deals with us in a kind way, but that never reflects His true essence. The reason is that we can't understand God's essence. It's just impossible for a human mind to understand that. It's beyond our comprehension. So we know that God deals with us in a kind way, in a merciful way. But we can't say that Hashem in essence, we can't say anything about the essence of God called Atmuso Yisbarach, because we have no understanding, we really have no conception of what God is. We just know the very little that He revealed to us about Him. And even the things that we know, there's nothing about His essence. And then let's just do one more paragraph. And what we have to understand about this, Hashem's existence, Hashem has to exist. This is something we know. His existence is necessary. But His essence is impossible for us to understand. Not only that, it's forbidden to think about God's essence. It's forbidden to try to think and understand Hashem's true essence. The rabbis already said, someone who looks at these four things, it's better than he never being created. It says, something which is beyond you, don't investigate. And you should have no involvement with hidden matters. What the sages are telling us is that, right, we're supposed to learn. We're supposed to understand everything we can about the Torah. But there are certain things that that we are not allowed to look into because it's impossible for us to understand. So there's no point of looking into something that is impossible for us to understand. I always give the mashal of explain to a blind person the difference between red and blue. Someone who never saw in his entire life. It's impossible. You're wasting your time. You can't do it. So for us to understand the essence of God is something which is impossible. So when we say God is kind, we're not describing His essence. We're saying that He relates to us with kindness and mercy and all of those things. But the true essence of God, that's something that we do not understand. Okay.
So questioning even, that's out of the question, pretty much questioning.
Yeah, trying to you won't be able to. We can't. Yeah. We don't have the ability, the human intellect, to be able to describe it. We wouldn't be able to, we're limited by the fact that we're physical beings created by God with certain limitations. So we can do a lot, and we're commanded to do as much as we can, but there's certain things that we have to accept, we can't do. Understand, even to understand concepts that God is above time, things like that, or that He has no beginning, infinite. It's very difficult. I don't think that's possible for a human being really to understand. We say these things and we get it. And the way I spoke to Rabbi Naaman once, who translated Derech Hashem, he says when we get to a lot of these things, even like the upper spiritual worlds, before we even get to talking about God, he says we're making like Venn diagrams. We're just like describing it. We don't even understand what we're talking about. We just understand definitions and what this is, what that is, but we don't understand the true essence of these things because we're very limited. Humans